Hell yes. Welcome back to the Lil Res podcast, also known as the Relatable Expressions of Self podcast. It is September 15 and it is room temperature, but outside, not inside of a room, unless we consider the whole world to be our room, or I guess the local region around me to be my room. Anyways, here's the gnocchi of the day, wherever it is on the screen. It is a picture of me holding Gnocchi. She's a shoulder cat, one of her many, but also few redeeming features, because she's kind of a brat. But that's okay. That's okay. But she loves to be picked up, and I love picking her up. And finally, we have the hat of the day, but it's not the hat I'm wearing right now. It is this hat right here, this Moomin hat. Can you see that, Richard? I don't know if I'll be able to find a picture of this. I guess I could take a photo of it. I can't wear this hat because it is a child size hat. And I do not have a child sized head. So it just is way too tight. I got that hat at the Moomin store in Finland when I was there for a research conference. I remember seeing the Moomin store and being like, I gotta go to the Moomin store. And then I was like, I want a hat. And I found the hat, but it was a kid's hat. But I was like, you know what? I just want a hat, and now I'm happy. So yeah, the Moomin hat.
So this is a collection only hat, unequipable.
Yeah, exactly. It's got like the red text or whatever in its item description. Alrighty.
All right. Well, how are you doing today, Harrison?
How am I doing? I am doing. Yeah, I'm doing interesting because I'm on one hand, I'm a little messy lately. I'm not super on top of everything right now. I've got some miscellaneous dangling to-do items and stuff that are going to be dangling for a little bit longer and have been dangling for a little bit now. The good thing is none of those things are particularly urgent or like key, but I think I feel a little, maybe a little out of whack. And the main reason for that was because last week I was I felt so busy, and because of the sponsor deadline. But I'm glad I was able to recognize that I was starting to be too busy and I had too much on my plate. And so I made adjustments accordingly. And since I've made those adjustments, basically at the start of this week, I've been definitely getting a little bit less messy each day. So even though I'm in maybe I'm in a bottom 50 percentile state, I'm in an upper 50 percentile velocity to get back on track for things. Yeah. So like, it's like, okay, things are not perfect right now, but I can tell that things are getting better. And that gives me a generally like positive orientation at the moment. The main thing I think, oh yeah, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say prognosis seems good, and it sounds like I suck at doing this personally, but it sounds like you caught yourself before you slipped too much. Like that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. For me, the big warning sign, we talked about this over the weekend a little bit, but the big warning sign was over the weekend. Well, I knew I was going to need to work over the weekend with how the deadline was looking. Something I was not super happy about. I do not like working over weekends unless it's something I'm really excited about. But like an external motivator like a deadline is not something I'm usually excited about. um, but yeah, the warning sign for me was just that like I wasn't in the mood to go on a walk. I wasn't in the mood to run. There, like these things that I knew were good for me, I was feeling a draw away from them. And I was like, that's probably a sign that things are not good right now. Not like in a Well, yeah, like it's just I want to do those things, and if something makes me not want to do those things, and I don't think there's anything, and I think it's strictly good to do those things, I should probably figure out a way that I can want to do those things again.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But enough about me. How are you doing, Richard?
I am well. I have transitioned coasts. I am now on the opposite coast.
Yes.
I won't say what coast I
The
jumped
coast
between.
mix up.
But yeah, a classic coast mix up. It is a lot cooler here than the prior coast I was on. This summer,
Doesn't that give
I
away
have
which
been-
coast you went from to
Yeah,
which?
yeah, it
Yeah.
does. But yeah, I've been going from like I've actually normalized like 95 in humid. Like I go out, I do all my
Right.
activities and just ignore that layer of sweat on me. Slash, I think my body does like adjust to it. But now I'm out here and during the day, it is at the hottest point of the day, it is cooler than like the coldest night I've experienced. So
Right.
it feels very relaxing. I did not realize I would appreciate more moderate weather. I will lose my tan, which is sad, but I will live. I will go on.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing. I feel like for me personally, when you're living in more extreme weather, you get used to it surprisingly fast. But the second you're out of it, your body's like, nah, that was not it. I like this normal shit a lot more.
It was like listen, like it took me a couple months to build up this lie, and you stripped it away.
Yeah.
From me.
And then you get back, you're like, wait, shit, it's extreme again. Yeah. It's interesting in Chicago because like it gets super fucking cold, right? Like, I mean, I know there are people love to brag about how cold or hot places get. And I don't think Chicago is the coldest place ever. But during the winters, you're usually going to be in the 10 to 20 degree range. That's like pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
And you really get used to this mindset of like, oh man, like mid 20s, pretty warm day, pretty solid winter day. And then you go somewhere else where like a cold winter day is like 30 degrees and you're there and you're like 30 degrees is pretty cold. I'm pretty chilly right now.
Having grown up most of my life on like much more moderate temperatures, it was crazy when I experienced my first like 0 degree temperature day. Like I think I've only experienced like 0 degrees for the first time this past year. And I was like, why does my forehead hurt? Like it's so cold it gives you a headache. I'm like,
Yeah.
how do people in the Midwest do it? Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't go outside. It's like dangerous.
Yeah. You hit this point where like what's really happening is that you're basically like charging a battery whenever you're inside, and the second you walk outside, your battery is immediately starting to deplete. and once it hits zero, you're like, you cannot be outside any longer. You're just, it's not a good idea.
Terminal kill.
Yeah. All right. One quick aside, and then I think we should move on from this. I think we should destigmatize weather talk. I think weather talk is good. I think it's intrinsic to the human experience, but that doesn't make it bad because it applies to everybody. I think it makes it good. I like to hear what people's weather takes are. I like to know. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's not a bad small talk item. Okay, sometimes people talk about the weather just to talk about the weather. But even then, if they're like, oh man, did you hear though? Like last week was the hottest day in our city in the last like 5 years. It starts to get interesting again. You know, you're like, okay, wait a second, I didn't know that. It was really hot. But anyways, this is gonna be the riffing episode. We're gonna riff a lot, viewers, because I didn't have as many agenda items today. But let's do a fun one. I wrote, I wish people could be passionate and dog shit at things. And what I mean by this, at least when I wrote it, is that I think it is okay, and actually I think it's awesome when people just like, for lack of a better word, I mean there are much better words, but like suck at something, you know, like they suck at writing, they suck at drawing, they suck at a video game, they suck at anything, but they like are still really into it. I
Mm.
think that's like dope. I think we should be like okay with that. I don't know what made me think this. I just feel like okay, for example, this is a little bit more specific, but like oftentimes if you're a woman in a male dominated field, if you like suck, people scrutinize that more. But if you're like good, people respect you more. But it's like, wait a second. I think that like if you're like a woman who is like a gamer, likes to play competitive games, there's tons of dudes who suck. You should also be able to suck without, any scrutiny. That's just does does my prompt bring any thoughts to mind, Richard? I don't know where I'm going with
Yeah.
this, to be honest.
No, no, no. I no. It makes sense. It's so. I have a lot more respect, I think, for someone that really sucks at something and keeps chugging forward. I was playing tennis last week, and every time I missed a shot, like I caught myself saying like sorry or like apologizing, and I was like, "What am I doing this for?" Like, like you're. It's normal to grow and learn and stuff like that. There's the stigma in society about being bad.
Yeah. I guess it's that just in general. I think from a learning perspective, it's like, I mean, I'm going to talk about this in the next video, like the main channel video. Um, but intrinsic to learning is like doing things that you can't do or trying to do things you can't do. You probably won't be able to. I mean, you won't be able to do the things you can't do, but you got to try to do them. um, and so you are always going to, if you are learning effectively, at least, you're always going to be bad at the thing that you're trying to do. That's what you should be doing. I don't want to say correct learning experience, but that's what gets the brain to change. I suppose that's not true. That's not true, but that's what gets the brain to change in the ways you want. The brain can change in ways you don't want. It can reinforce things you don't like. But if you're focusing your neuroplasticity towards areas of weakness that you want to improve on, which is basically what the act of learning is, that's where you'll see the most changes in your abilities.
Do you ever think?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, go on.
oh no. The other thing I think that's also tough or challenging is progress is really hard to like. I think humans in general we're probably pretty bad at measuring our own
Yes.
progress, right?
Yes. That's a huge one. Yeah. Like, so the TLDR for learning, right, is you have to figure out what you can't do. You got to practice that. And then you got to evaluate how you did and make adjustments accordingly. Like how everything went, both like how you performed, but also like, did you actually identify the right thing that you need to work on? You can get more complex than that, but that's like, if you want to boil it down, those are like the 3 steps. Like every learning theory can be fit into those 3 buckets in some way. It sounds, but it sounds simple, but each of those things is in and of itself a skill that is difficult to do from like starting from the beginning, right? Figuring out what you need, figuring out what you can't do, the whole like you don't know what you don't know dilemma is quite difficult for students to navigate, especially if you're used to curriculum that basically tells you what you can't do. But that's not that's a very practical approach to things. But if you're like a self-directed learner or something, you can't rely on curriculum, and it's not even the most effective thing to do to rely on curriculum. I mean, I'm going on a huge tangent there, but like Anyways, it's hard to know what you can't do. It's hard to identify with precision what you need to work on. Absolutely, absolutely.
Also, like, not to mention how deflating it is when you do inventory and you're like, oh wow, you're like, here are the gaps. I know for a lot of people
Yes.
that's inspirational, but I think for every person that's inspirational for, I think there's like three other people who are like, holy shit, I'm so far away from like being where I need to be.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really daunting. I think I've said this. I don't know if I've ever actually said this in a video I've put online, but whenever people ask me, like, okay, what's like the main takeaway about learning that I should know? For viewers who don't know, I literally studied learning for my PhD, among other things, but my focus was on learning. So I, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but I read hundreds of research papers about this.
This guy learns.
I learned. But the big takeaway for me from like studying learning was that the hardest part, in my opinion, this isn't universally true, but it's generally true. The hardest part about learning is the emotional dilemmas, or not even dilemmas, just the emotional challenges that you face. Because I can tell you exactly what you need to do to learn something in a lot of situations. Like for established subjects, established fields like math or like computer science or something, where like, sure, we haven't figured everything out, but like thousands and thousands of man hours have been put towards like figuring out like education for these things. It's not perfectly optimized, but you could tell a student, like, if you do A, B, and C, you will learn more effectively than a student who doesn't. And we can show you all kinds of studies that show that when students do A, B, and C, they learn more. Showing that that's true is not hard. The hard part is getting students to do A, B, and C without some kind of incentive, right? Without, like, usually you have to give them like extra credit on their grade or something, or you have to pay them, or they only do it for 1 week, but then they don't keep doing it after you've run your study. And for my research in particular, I was all about trying to understand why don't students do A, B, and C when you're not forcing them to, basically. And what I kept finding over and over again is that it's just an emotional struggle. And I'm not the first person to realize that, but like it's as simple as ranging anywhere from like a weak I don't wanna to a very strong like, hey, this I'm like traumatized from a past educational experience, and every time I hit this part of the learning process, I start to get like, I start to have a trauma response. I start to shut down because the last time I was doing this, somebody yelled at me or I got a really bad grade and it made me afraid for my future or something. Like it's overcoming those emotional boundaries that's a lot harder than just doing the thing, especially since learning, like I said earlier, is intrinsically about sucking chronically. And
Yeah.
that's so hard to stomach. It's hard for me to stomach, at least. So yeah, that's my that's my little learning spiel. Hope I didn't go too off course there.
So, so it sounds like to learn, you need to first learn about yourself.
You do. Yeah, you absolutely do.
How do you take on that mindset of? And sorry, this I feel like we're
we can
venturing
yeah we can
very
we
off
can ride
topic
this.
here. But I guess to close this all out, how do you take on that mindset of being comfortable permanently sucking, or like or like you know what I mean, like just chronically sucking, like
Yeah.
or being comfortable wallowing and thriving in this suck.
Yeah. This is this is all very relevant to the video I'm writing right now for the sponsor, which is interesting. So it's pretty fresh. I mean, it's also stuff I thought about for years. But at least for me, I still get not exactly the same, but I still get the same flavors of emotional responses to the same parts of the learning process that are like hard for me. Everybody has different hard parts, but I mean, we talked about hard parts last week, but I still get like frustrated or upset or sad about the same kinds of things, that never went away. I think it's like dampened over time, but like I still get upset when like I don't know, something doesn't do well. But the two things I think that help me are first that nowadays I pretty much always preemptively anticipate that that's going to happen. Where it's like if I'm doing something new, or even not something that's like not new, but just if I'm doing something that I know is me having a learning orientation where I'm going to be challenging myself in some way, I just expect that at some point I'm going to feel sad or upset or frustrated or whatever. It's going to happen, but being ready for it to happen just kind of softens the blow a lot. It's just yeah, it like being ready it helps a lot. And then I think on the other side of that, being ready lets you know that when it happens, it's normal, it will pass,
Mm.
and you just need to get through it. So having that in mind, so nowadays, whenever I'm like, I think I could try and apply this to more parts of my life, but especially in regards to like learning something or getting better at something. Nowadays, when I hit that hard part, even if in the moment I'm like, or whatever, like longitudinally, I'm always like, okay, but if I just keep going, it'll be okay. The second thing I do is I have like what I believe are a pretty effective set of copes nowadays. Like I know that if I touch grass, if I exercise, if I like talk to friends or like my girlfriend immediately once I start feeling like those kinds of negative emotions, that I'll feel better. Like there's like a suite of tools that like I've just kind of through trial and error have realized like if I feel this kind of way when I do this type of thing, I just feel better. And that helps me keep going. You know, it doesn't get rid of the feeling, but it helps me keep going. And I know that as long as I'm keeping going, like that's like the key to it all is just finding the ways that let you persist. This is a huge, huge motif in the next video. But yeah, I don't like to I don't want to stress that this is my individual experience, but I do have some expertise on the subject as well.
Fair enough. So realistic expectations and copium is how we get through.
Yeah, basically. It's so interesting hearing you frame it as realistic expectations because I don't know what it is. Something about calling something realistic sounds cynical usually. Um at least I don't know, maybe that's the connotation that came to mind for me. But it really is being realistic. Like I think the average person tends to be extremely unrealistic about how the learning process works and how it's going to go, including me. For whatever reason, we have like cognitive biases. Part of it is probably the world we live in,
Mm-hmm.
that push us away from the things that are actually good for us when it comes to learning. And so being realistic is realizing that those things are actually not as bad as they feel, and they're actually not bad at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember when I was, I guess, and or you can speak on it too, but when I was a lot younger in high school, I used to take a lot of pride because I was one of those kids. Then, like, you see this on Reddit too. It's like the
Yeah.
kids that were like told that like they were like advanced in their learning, and so as the result of that, like they eventually kind of became complacent. Slash, like there became a lot of pressure tied to it because if
Yeah.
that's part of your identity, then like, and if you're not good at something, then like you can't accept that. Like I remember in high school, I took physics and calc at the same time, and I just like there reached the point where I was like, I just don't know shit. I was like, so it was so hard
Mm-hmm.
because we were learning about like derivatives and integrals, shorthand, and physics to like get our equations before we were even learning about that in calculus, like before the concept was even introduced.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so It was just like so racking, and it was so. And I just remember that was when I learned so much because I was just wallowing in the suck.
Yeah.
It was probably the time of my life where I have like academically learned the most amount of complex concepts in my life.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like it felt good. It was really hard and like it was really emotional, but it felt really good.
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting to hear about actually. I'm glad that it turned out to be a manageable load, even if it was a hard. There's this learning concept called zone of proximal development, often
Mm.
called ZPD. It's Vygotsky, if you want to Google it, viewer. um, but I feel like that sounds so pretentious. That's just what it. That's just what it is. Vygotsky coined the term ZPD. Anyways, I shouldn't be so. I shouldn't hedge something like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with raising academic concepts. Um, the idea is really really simple. That basically the idea is that there is this region of like challenge for a learner that's like the ideal place for them to learn the most. Like it's basically the area that is slightly beyond their current set of skills, but not too far beyond that they're totally lost. And as long as you keep the learner in the ZPD, and there's a lot of different techniques for trying to do that, that's like where they'll get the most out of it. And it sounds like you were
Mm.
right on the like upper edge of your ZPD in that situation.
I probably went past it multiple times and
Yeah,
had
yeah,
to
yeah,
like negotiate myself back down.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's and I guess that's where like the value of like having a support network comes in, right? Like people, like you have your friends, you touch grass. Like if you ever exceed the ZPD, I could see that being a very deflating
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Because you're not gonna be able to stay in there forever, or like
Yeah.
maybe theoretically, but like we don't know enough about human brains and all the subjects of the world to do that with perfect accuracy. Um,
And different people probably have different, like you were
yeah.
saying,
Oh,
different tolerances based on past traumas and
yeah.
stuff and past experiences. So someone's zone, like you can probably, I'm assuming you can like slowly work on building it out with good experiences and victories under your belt.
Richard. So ZPD, at least as I understand it, usually refers to like a cognitive challenge zone. But I totally agree
Mm,
with the idea that it is also like your emotional challenges zone as well. Maybe
right.
not exactly ZPD, but like yeah, your range, your difficulty range for what you can emotionally handle, I think is also like equally as critical here, right? Um, it's like okay, what can you understand, but also like what can you just tolerate?
Yeah,
Because
right.
it's going to be different. Yeah. um I think like unfortunately my like emotional tolerance for things is a little bit tighter than my actual ZPD is because I've
Mm,
just burnt myself out too many times in life. And so now I'm like extra sensitive to not getting burnt out. But I think I do have a little bit more give to go. And I've been trying to widen. I've been trying to widen, but it's like hard, right? Because anything that reminds me of getting burnt out is like, well, it makes me it makes it too hard, you know. Like
yeah.
I don't know if I'm traumatized, but I probably am. That sounds so terrible, but like I think all of us have forms of trauma. You know, I like we should also destigmatize trauma.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
just how life is. Some stuff is gonna happen to you that your brain is gonna just record like a deep like chasm into your neural pathways.
Yeah, it makes the core memory even when you didn't even want it to. You're like,
Yeah, yeah.
why is this one?
Yeah, it's quite hard to avoid, I think. And if you don't avoid it, or if you do avoid it, I feel like it makes you more susceptible to things in the future. Maybe that's
Hmm.
completely pseudoscience, though. But you've met people who are like like so excessively coddled that like while they don't seem to have any past traumas, they also don't seem to be able to handle like more intense situations. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm gonna circle back. We got on a big tangent there, but that's okay. I think we're closing the loop here.
Hmm.
I think it's good to be passionate about things. I think it's good to be dog shit about things from a learning perspective. I also think I love, and I don't know how to say this without making it sound like I'm mocking, but genuinely, deep in my heart, I love to see the different ways that people are shitty at things. Because when you're new or bad at something, you do things that nobody else does. You know, you do things that a more experienced person could never think to do.
Mm.
And observing that to me is like always so novel that I okay, literally last night YouTube knows that I love watching videos that have very few views, and so it'll just recommend me videos that have like 15 views, 100 views all the time. And it recommended me a song that had like 16 views on YouTube. And I listened to it, and it was like super out of key, like the tempo. What's the? It wasn't on beat. What is there? Is there a term for that? It was like,
Offbeat?
yeah,
Syncopated?
yeah. It was
Well,
offbeat.
syncopated would imply it was purposefully like that. I don't know if it was purposefully
Yeah,
in
it
this
was
video.
basically like out of key, not
Yeah,
rhythmically sound.
sure.
Um, but at the same time, for the first like 30 seconds of me listening to it, I was like, is this a bad song or is this a really good song? Because I've
Right.
never heard anything like this in my life. Um, and I listened to it a little bit longer and I was like, no, this is definitely a person who doesn't know how to play the guitar, strumming on the guitar, trying to imitate like what like a there's like strained vocals like or something,
Yeah, yeah.
like trying to imitate like the strained vocals of like a pop singer. Um and so I poked around their like channel a bit, and it quickly became apparent like this is just like a teenager who's probably like just starting to learn music. But they were like putting out like dozens and dozens of songs. I'm guessing like every time they have a song idea, they just record it and put it on the internet. But I was like, oh man, like I genuinely think this is so cool that I get to see this, because 99% of the time people are far too insecure and self-aware to put this stuff online. So I never get to see what this like messiness looks like. But this person, for whatever reason, decided to share everything. And I get to see what this like very fresh learner experience looks like for this person. Like I'm not going to listen to this music as music, but as like an artifact of like trying to figure things out. That is genuinely so fascinating to me. And I love seeing that kind of stuff. And sometimes it legitimately inspires me. Sometimes somebody does something in a way that is like shitty, quote unquote, but like it's like, oh, but I've never thought of doing this in this way. And like if and now I want to try doing this out in like my more polished, refined way, but like I never considered this approach to things.
Hmm.
Because yeah, learners do weird stuff that you just would never have anticipated.
Yeah, you're so learning pilled. That's
I am
funny.
super learning pilled. It is one of my three pillars of how I view the world. My three pillars:
Awesome.
learning, design, computer science. And yes, those are the things I studied. So that probably contributes a lot to it.
Could be. All right.
Sorry, what are you
On
saying?
that note, you wanna move on to our next topic?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Let's do Oh, okay. Let's do a recap of how things are going with the
Sure.
sponsor and stuff. So, last pod I talked about how I agreed to a sponsorship. I had a deadline. The deadline is like a week from now. Yeah, exactly a week from today that I'm recording this. I wanted to finish the second part of the StarCraft series for that sponsorship because I'm pretty sure part 2 is going to get like I need to, what is it? Knock on wood, crossing my fingers. Is crossing doesn't matter. I think that video is going to get a decent number of views, enough views for the sponsor to pay out in full. Because there's like view thresholds and stuff. But I knew when I took the sponsor that I was going to need to crunch to get that out because there's a lot of work to do still. It's just a slightly more complex video than part 1 is, and it's longer too. And so I spent last week crunching, and I realized when I had my weekend realization, like, oh man, like I'm pretty unhappy with this working experience. And while I still think it's in the realm of possibility for me to finish this by the deadline, I'm going to be really, really unhappy. I'd have to make myself very unhappy to do that. So I was like, okay, I should figure out with the time I have left, is there something else I can do? I could still ask for an extension. It's getting a little late to do that, but as I understood it, the deadline is not super flexible anyways, so I didn't want to bank on that. But I decided to just make a different video, which is an end of year review of my past year, because as of this week, literally exactly this week, 1 year ago is when I officially quit my PhD and started YouTube full time. And I'd wanted to do a year in review video because I kind of did I did a video when I started the year. It makes sense to me to close that loop and make a video when I end the year. And I wanted to make it, but I felt like I was too busy to make it. But now I'm like, you know what? This can be the sponsor video. And it's probably not going to get a ton of views, but I'm getting a lot out of just taking the time to reflect and think critically of how my last year has gone and what it actually meant to me. So I think it's been a very valuable experience. And however the sponsor does pay out, because if it doesn't get a lot of views, I'm not going to get paid as much. I will just see that as extra cash and me fulfilling the sponsor obligation either way, because they don't care if I get fewer views. They just pay me less.
Yeah,
so
fair.
It's all good. But yeah, did I have anything else I wanted to say there? I mean, that's basically it, honestly. I'm pretty excited. I've been writing like crazy all week. I've been writing a ton. I haven't gotten to write in a long time. I guess I wrote for my HCI video, but that was super short. I wrote that in like a few hours and I didn't really edit it afterwards. But this has been like, I probably sat down and spent like 15 hours in the past week just writing, like not counting breaks or anything, just writing, because I've been flowing super hard. I'm so glad that writing is something that I can do and it's not painful because I have so many reps. Yeah.
Little rep podcast.
A little rep, the little rep podcast.
Big rep podcast.
Yeah. I want to go on a tangent on how I write, but like, I'm not going to do that. But basically, my advice to anybody who has to write is, you need to figure out what your different modes of writing are so that you can switch between them as needed. Like, it's almost like shifting gears, right? Like, sometimes you're writing full prose that's like for a final draft or at least a draft. But sometimes you're writing an outline, and sometimes you're just writing snippets that like don't go anywhere in particular, but are like a thought that came into your head that you know could fit in somewhere else. Whatever your buckets end up being, you don't want to be stuck writing in one mode, because sometimes, I mean, just inevitably, you're going to have like some kind of writer's block, or you're not going to have any more ideas for writing in whatever mode you're in. And at that point, you should shift gears and start writing in a mode that you can write in. Like, if I'm like uber super stuck, I can't think of anything, I go into like, I just let like, what is the word I'm looking for here? I just, I returned a monkey, and I literally will do like a stream of consciousness writing. I'll just write exactly what's on my head and nothing more, just to be writing. And usually after
So
doing that,
it could be
yeah,
totally unrelated to the essay at
it could
hand,
be
and
it
you're
could be
just like
literally anything. Yeah, it's just
like the
just
trees are
writing
green today
for the
or
sake of
something
writing.
like that. Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, and because if you do that, after just a few minutes, most likely you'll you'll end up latching onto an idea that can be useful for a different mode, whether it's the outline, the scratch, the draft, whatever. And I'm very glad that because I had to spend so much time writing during my PhD, I can comfortably move between those modes without even thinking about it nowadays. I don't think I'm an amazing writer, but I do think I have a pretty solid writing process. So writing is good. I don't know who's listening to this who has to write a lot, but write in different modes. That's my advice. um, all right. I think we have time for one more subject, right? Probably.
Yeah, we could do it.
Okay. We'll be fast. We'll be fast. Rise of the group chat. I think. I think that we prefer talking in group chats nowadays. Do you agree with that statement, Richard?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I know we also as a group in our group chats, a lot of my friends that like live more normal lives that like are like less online, I think have a lot lower of a group chat tolerance. Like their
Ah.
threshold is a lot lower. But for me, who like always loves being like, I love stimulation. I love like constant like noise and stuff. I'm like, ooh, group chat is everything. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the group chat is basically like the modern forum in a way. It's like an extremely localized forum where everything is in one thread, but like nowadays we have enough tools that like you can have multi-threaded conversations as needed. Um, I just I don't know what it is. I think I don't exclusively use group chats. Of course, I think maybe some people do, but I don't think a lot of people do. But definitely most of my messaging happens in group chats. Um,
Yep.
and I don't. I guess I wrote this topic down because I don't know how this happened, and I don't think anybody has. I haven't seen anybody point it out or talk about it. Um, but I feel like it crept on us, and I don't think it's just me. I think it's most of us. I think we all migrated the group chats.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. I remember growing up, like I on MSN Messenger, I would rarely have chats that would have two or three people in it. Like it would
Yeah.
usually just be one-on-one chats. Um, Group chats are also so interesting too. It reminds me a little bit of, not to get all like corporate-y and boring, but like it reminds me a lot of like, and again, I work fully remotely, so I'm not like a return to office type person. But there
Yeah.
are undeniable benefits about like if you're just always
Mm,
around people, you'll have more discourse and you'll have unexpected conversations that end up
yes.
being interesting slash valuable slash like redeeming. Like if you and me were to chat on a text thread, we would chat 80% less because there'd always have to be some form of like intentionality.
Right.
It also reminds me of like how my ideal social setting is not one on one. I like groups
Yeah.
of three or groups of four. I
Hmm.
mean, groups of three, honestly, more than four because I can tap out whenever I want. Groups of four usually end up in like parallel two by two, which is kind of exhausting as well. But like it gives space. Like you don't need to be intentional. You can just put something out to the group and one or the other person can answer it.
Yeah. I do like okay, threes. I love threes. I love threes. I do also like fours. Fours are just trickier, right? Because you need to have. It's just like more permutations of alignments. Because you're right, the pairing
Yeah.
off thing is very. It will happen, and so you
Yeah.
need to have tenable pairs.
Yeah. Everyone needs to be interchangeable, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah. But what you say is very interesting, and I think very true, which is that group chats are almost one of the few digital forms of communication that naturally has affordances for like serendipitous conversation. I used a lot of big words there, but what I mean is that, like in an office space, you can overhear your coworkers talking about something and chime in. And I suppose like a Discord server or like Reddit can kind of work like that, but it doesn't really have the same like privacy or scale as like a more personal setting, right? Like, I think there is an ideal. I mean, I think you can get to pretty large group chats and everything works out. But in terms of actual true active members, I don't know if you can support more than like, let's say 30 or 40 people before it starts to be a little bit too much, right? But if you're like 30 people or less in a group chat, yeah, it is like an office setting that lets you like chime in and out as needed. Yeah. Because it's just so interesting. This is like something that like a lot of social media has tried to solve for years and years and years, which is like, how do you replicate the experience of like socializing offline? Right? I don't remember when we were talking about this, Richard, but like interruptibility is a big thing. Did we talk about this on the podcast last week?
I have goldfish brain when it comes to
podcasts. Okay. Well, we need to wrap up anyways soon, so I'll just keep it short. But basically, like, in real life, we're very good at passively communicating how interruptible we are to other people. We wear like headphones or earbuds. Those indicate to people that we're not available to talk. In an office space, we might position our body in a certain way. Somebody who's tight and really focused on their screen is not very interruptible. Somebody who's reclining, lounged back is probably a lot more interruptible. Somebody who keeps their door wide open to their office is very interruptible versus somebody who has it closed. These types of things are really important for socialization in real life because like as humans, we just pick up on these things as indicators of when we can and cannot talk to people. But those indicators just do not readily exist naturally or unnaturally in most forms of digital communication. They don't even exist really in the group chat, besides the fact that the group chat has an implicit interruptibility built into it, right? You can always call into the void, and it's never wrong to do so.
True.
It's almost even more interruptible than a standard office place, because in a standard office place, you can't just stand up in your chair and be like, man, the Mariners game, huh? I mean, I guess you could actually. But yeah, I think the group chat is that sweet spot of like, I don't think it was intentional, but it happens to have the right features for a more lubricated social setting.
Especially
as simple as it is.
The reply to feature really helps keep it clean too.
And
focused.
Yeah. You can be very tidy nowadays, and the reacts and stuff too, like different degrees of commitment to interaction. Yeah, it's a well-oiled form of interaction. But yeah, I think we should wrap up. It's what's the time? Are we?
We're at 48 minutes and 50 seconds.
Okay, I think that's good enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I could keep talking, but I got work to do, and I think the battery on the camera is getting a little bit low. So
great.
Thanks for listening / watching, viewers. I said I was going to say this at every podcast, so I guess I will. You're doing great. I believe that. I really do. I think everybody's doing great. And if you don't feel like you're doing great, you actually are. Because if you're fighting to persist, you're doing great. Goodbye. Goodbye now.
Goodbye
Thanks
now.
for watching. Bye.